Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going into another guide, and this one's going to be kind of one of my all-time favorite characters to play, and if you've been watching my stream, I play her quite a lot, which is going to be Soraka. So we're going to actually have a guide for Soraka. I have a lot of good gameplay and videos for you guys, so let's just jump right into it. So why do I feel like Soraka has kind of been one of my at the top of the tier list, consistently played kind of characters? Well, one of the things that I really love about this character is the fact that she can actually win most laning matchups if you're doing a good job consistently trading. But it's not nearly as lane dependent because of the fact that even if your laning phase is just going neutral, then you have lots of ways to impact the game. Whether it's your ultimate from long range or, across the map on your top laner that's fighting with a jungler, or you need it to protect yourself and your teammate from dying for a gank or a dive. I'm a big fan that she has a lot of ways to augment people who are playing aggressively on your team and also save people in defensive positions. So I'm just a big fan of that. She does really well in most laning phase matchups, and she complements team fighting and team play really, really well. So she doesn't really need too many specific things to hit. Plus, I'm also a big fan of her because of the fact that she is not lane dependent. She does well and obviously better in some lane matchups than others, but she can kind of be paired with any of the AD carries that are currently being played, so I like that as one of my go-to blind picks.
Warning, warning, warning.
So, without further ado, let's just jump right into kind of our general setups and what we're looking for from this champion. So first off, we're going to go into our rune build. I usually run one or two different pages, and it just mostly depends on kind of my laning matchup and what I'm trying to do in the game. So the most common one that most people will end up running, and I've been a big fan of it ever since the durability change, has been Airy, with Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm. You can substitute Gathering Storm for Scorch in lane matchups where you have like a lot of extra poke or maybe you're going to trade a lot, but I've been a bigger fan of Gathering Storm as it's more consistent, whereas sometimes I don't really know how laning phase is going to go with my AD carries until I've loaded in, even if it maybe is a poke-oriented lane. After that, it's just taking the resolve tree with that conditioning and revitalize. Want to power up our extra healing, and obviously you're going to probably be chased around and dove on pretty frequently in fights, so I'm just a big fan of the conditioning for that extra burliness for the after laning phase situations. You can take bone plating, but I found that most of the times it's not really necessary for any of the laning phases, and I much prefer the conditioning since it makes me way tankier once we get past that 12-minute mark, which is super consistent, and kind of what you're aiming for is the team fighting stages of the game for this character. After that, pretty much it's just a rush to Moonstone as soon as you can with pairing of the Lucidity Boots. And then after that, I'm a big fan of actually going Redemption. I know most people are a big fan of healing reduction in most cases with the Enchanter healing reduction item, Future Fire, but in most cases I found, especially after the nerfs to healing reduction, just empowering your own kit is much more potent than actually trying to bring down someone else's. So even if there is a lot of healing, I'm not a fan of this as my second item. I much prefer the Redemption for a couple of reasons. Number one, and we'll kind of super dabble into this once we get into the team fight stage, but usually in team fights, you kind of want the enemy team to come into you or, use their engage tools on someone else beforehand. Now, since your heal is relatively short range, I'm a big fan of being able to drop that Redemption and let that from long range kind of heal people while all the engage tools and, dashes, etc. Happen, then usually use my ulti, then come in and start healing. So I'm a big fan of doing stuff like that, so that's why I go the Redemption pretty often. Plus, I love Redemption second because it heals you. And this means that you're turning a tool that not only can keep your teammates alive, but it can keep you alive, which is incredibly important, especially in some games where you're just getting relentlessly dove over and over again. So after that, you can go things like Chemtech, Future Fire, if you feel like you need to reduce healing, but for the most part I've stayed away from these kinds of items and just gone into increasing my healing and shielding. Things like Mikhail's are really great too, and I know I get a lot of questions about Warmogs. I'm a big fan of it maybe as your last item, but I don't like rushing it too much because it only helps you. in most cases. So, if you build the Warmogs, your healing isn't going to be that much stronger, and you kind of need to drop combat for this. I would only really recommend getting Warmogs as maybe like your third item if there's an insane amount of poke that you're just healing, where like no fighting is occurring, and you're just consistently cycling heals into your teammates. I think these occasions actually happen pretty rarely, though, so I tend to not get Warmogs till maybe third or fourth item in most cases. Just focusing on that bonus healing and shielding. So that's kind of like their build and, what we're looking for in terms of rune setups. The other rune setup that we can also run too is a more defensive one. This is one, maybe you're playing against a lane that's trying to kill you a lot and you're worried about dying in the early stages, or you just want to have extra durability on your own character. Then you can go into Guardian, take Font of Life, Conditioning, and Revitalize once again, and then we just take the Sorcery Tree secondary, which is just going to do Mana Flow and Transcendence. We're skipping the Gathering Storm since that's not as much as important. And this is just mostly into all-in lanes where you feel like you need the extra shielding and healing. Most of the time I don't take this nowadays, though, ever since the durability patch, because of the fact that I feel like most characters are pretty durable and burly in most cases, so we don't really need to run this page too often. In fact, I've pretty much all but phased this page out comparatively to the other page that I'm running. Hey guys, if you're deciding that, maybe you want to pick up one of those Star Guardian skins, don't forget to use my creator code right here, and you can help support the stream and the content that's coming out. Appreciate it a lot, guys. So next, obviously, is going to be talking a little bit about laning phase and kind of how we utilize our mechanics of the character. For those who are not as experienced with this character, we want to be trying to hit our Qs as frequently as possible so that we can also heal our teammate, because it carries over the healing over time to our teammate, plus also it reduces the amount of HP that we use. Kind of the simple basic mechanics, but the important things actually are in the laning phase stages. So a couple of things that I actually do in laning phase. Number one, the Q is really important to acknowledge as a slow projectile. This means that if you are throwing it at max range on someone and they start walking away, you will most likely miss it. So a lot of times, especially when I have my health potions and the first level or so, to get pressure in the lane, I'm a big fan of doing what I just call range checking, which is I walk up and I try to auto attack the enemy player. If you can auto attack the enemy player, your Q can go off and hit them no matter where they're going, as long as you're accurately aiming it. This will mean that you can trade really, really effectively and get a lot of swings in HP. Other than that, another thing is if you're playing against someone who's playing really aggressively, what you can do is kind of pull them in, where you're walking in and out of their attack range and then throwing the Q so that when they're walking forward, they're getting hit by it. These are the great tools for hitting your Q really consistently, but the important thing to note is it's very easy to miss using that second technique. So a lot of times, especially when you're high HP, using that range checker will help you a ton. Plus also, sometimes the important thing to do is throw your Qs at people when they're going for last hits on minions. This will be the most opportune time for you to kind of catch them where they're not quite focused on you, and it will allow you to consistently hit Qs. Now, one mistake I also see in laning phase 2 is the use of silence. Now, the silence can be used to make mana flow, ban procs, and just generally, make gold in the laning phase. It's a good poking tool. But it's important to also acknowledge that this is probably your only way to stop either ganks or all-ins from occurring. So it's really critical that we use it at the right times. So for example, if anything on the enemy team or the lane has ways to combo things together, then using your silence to stop that is really, really important. An easy referendum is someone like Thresh. When they throw their hook, silencing the Thresh so that he can't use Flay. This is how you break up CC chains and actually get a lot of value out of your silence in most cases. Another thing to note too is putting silences in front of people's paths. So this is one of the harder things to get used to, but once you start utilizing it, you'll see silence in a lot of different ways, which is kind of if a jungler is ganking you or some player is all in and you putting the silence where they want to walk so that it can activate and block out that path is really, really a great way to utilize it. And also comboing it with ganks. So whenever you have a CC-oriented champion, ganking for you, then what you want to do is utilize your silence afterwards. Ever have a Twisted Fate portal in or an RA charm go off? Utilizing that and putting the silence directly on top of these CCs will help layer a lot of extra kills. So make sure that you're really actually quite conservative with this spell, especially after you get through the first couple of levels and you start actually kind of brawling and fighting. So that kind of ties us into, now that we've kind of identified a large portion of, our skills for Soraka, is team fighting. Most important things to really note is your positioning at the start of the fight is the most important thing. So a lot of people, I feel like, sometimes are too greedy with their ultimate. Your ultimate a lot of the times is actually the first spell that I use in a lot of team fights. And the reason for this is kind of what we were talking about with the redemption. We want to see the enemy players utilize their dashes in, going forward, etc. You want everyone to kind of be colliding with each other. And so in order to do that, you usually need to be standing further away than you can use your heal. So because of that, if you run into scenarios where you're playing really conservatively, etc., it's okay to have your ulti be one of your first spells, because then usually that means that you have absorbed, your team has absorbed all the engages, and now you're using your ulti, and then you can start moving in and really healing people up. Importance of priority, though, is really layering your silence down. It's either disrupting enemy players from using their CC or layering on top of your teammates. So the examples of Twisted Fate and Ari doesn't really have, it can extend to a lot of different characters, but anyone that is using CC on somebody, you're kind of ideally trying to put silences down on that. Other than that, make sure that you're more cognizant of throwing out your Qs before you're using Ws, especially after your ulti is down. Since you won't actually have great ways to recover your HP, this is a way for you, if there's not an urgency of keeping someone alive, great way to make sure that you're still refilling and replenishing their health, but also not depleting your own in a lot of cases. Outside of that, my best piece of advice is to go in and out of fights. And what I mean by that is once you've activated your heal, start pulling back a little bit and then leverage that bonus movement speed. I think this is a really underrated thing about it is it's okay if you're not directly on top of someone. If someone is immediately needing of heals, usually you can keep up with them or re-enter the fight by leveraging that bonus movement speed walking towards those people who are low at HP. Outside of that, positioning is really paramount. The easiest way for you to lose a fight is for you to walk too far forward or be too close to your teammates at the start of the fight and then just get jumped on and maybe have to use all of your spells to protect yourself, and then you're either not healing your teammates or you're just flat out dead in a lot of ways. Another thing to note too is if you do have people piling onto you, using spells on you, etc., especially if they're melee, try to use your silence on top of yourself and kite over it. This is a great way for you to kind of self-peel and get away from people that normally you feel like you can't get away in most cases. Leveraging that silence will be a critical part of the success of you getting in and out of fights. Plus also a really well placed silence on characters like Zac, for example, engaging, or Sejuani, or any of these kinds of characters that use multiple pieces of their engage will really disrupt an enemy player and honestly allow your teammates to return fire way faster, putting you at a huge advantage. So making sure that your silence is nice and pristine and making sure we're not getting jumped on in team fights are going to be keys to success when it comes to team fighting. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment in the section below. Hope you liked this guide. I like putting out these guides. It's been a lot of fun for me. And then maybe let me know in the comments what other guides you would like to see, since I have been slowly releasing all of the ones that I've been playing. Anyway, guys, talk to you guys later. Peace out.